Pandit Vamdev Shastri ji or Dr. David Frawley, namaste. Thank you very, very much for your time.
Namaste. Thank you.
My first question to you, Prabhu, is what is the significance of the consecration of Ram Lalla at Ayodhya, at the Ram Mandir? How do you see the significance?
Well, I see it as the long-awaited and necessary civilizational awakening of Bharat. India is not just a modern nation state along European lines, which was the Nehruvian idea. It is a great civilization with an important history and legacy for the world. Its legacy through yoga, Vedanta, Ayurveda, so many things has come out. But at the same time, India has not had a sense of its true identity, and there's been a lot of confusion and disruption. And instead of becoming Bharat in the awakening that civilization, it's become a dynasty supporting a certain coterie of people and their influences and personal needs today, and often a leftist Marxist ideology.
Would you say that there was an attempt to distort our civilizational background, our ethos, and how integral is Ram to Bharat?
Well, and relative to Ram, Ram is, of course, the avatar of Dharma. He's the national identity in many ways. Even the festivals, from Ram Navami to Diwali, are based upon Ramayana. And it was more an attempt to just negate the history of Bharat, not just simply to distort it in some ways. And it was part of a whole historical distortion, starting with the Aryan invasion theory. And from there, denying there was continuity to India's civilization, seeing India as a civilization of invaders. So one invader was as good as another invader. And also it allowed people to see India in terms of the Nehru dynasty in 1947 as if it didn't exist before. And they gave their national devotion and pride to the dynasty, not to their own culture. And so there was no cultural renaissance. Now compare them with Aurobindo. Aurobindo outlined the cultural renaissance that was needed, the civilizational awakening. That could not occur under the Nehruvian idea of India. And now that is arising. If that arises, that whole civilizational power, pride, creativity, spirituality will also come up. A study not only the ancient traditions, but this is also what Vivekananda said. He also wanted India to rise at a civilizational level. Even the great thinkers of the West who admired India, even someone like Emerson or Thoreau, they were before the independence movement pretty much per se, but that was the India that they honored. And Vivekananda brought that Bharatiya India of yoga, Vedanta, all these things to the entire world. He didn't come there in the name of European nationalism and colonialism and how good the British or the Marxists were. So India became independent at one level, but that independence was hijacked by a certain dynasty and group of people who were largely that group that had a predominant British education and British idea of India.
The entire issue, political, legal fight, fracas over Ram Janmabhoomi, that's been settled by the courts, but now with Gyanvapi and Krishna Janmabhoomi and many other places, do you believe this could have been settled at the time of partition, when it was Hindustan and Pakistan, partition was on religious lines?
Well, that is the sad thing. Even after India was partitioned in favor of Islamic Pakistan, which certainly didn't protect the Hindus at all, India did not give any, they didn't give any sacred sites of the Hindus back to the Hindus. And they continued the principle of British colonial rule, and even this places of worship law froze these sacred sites in India in 1947. So that was a great disappointment. And if it had been done then, there would have been no trouble at all. If 4, 6, if all these Kashi and Varanasi and all these Ram Janmabhoomi, Krishna Janmabhoomi were taken back in 1947 or at that time, no one would have cared because the Muslims had their state, partition had been done, and even the Muslim population in India had to accept the fact they were in a Hindu majority India. So all that problem would have been avoided. It was only done to protect these certain group in power, namely the Lutyens or the Nehruvian type. And as they took power, they brought in leftist historians that denied and dismantled the history of India or Bharat. They created institutions like JNU, no Hindu institutions, and no great temples, but they also named most of the new institutions and organizations after the dynasty. And I would also have to say, dynasty is not a secular concept either. Dynasty is also a medieval concept. And the irony is they gave themselves Bharat Ratnas, Nehru and Indira, even though they did not believe in or support or uphold the history of and culture of Bharat, or at least they could have done a much better job than they did.
This word secular, Professor, and if I may ask you, has it been debased? What does actually secular mean? Hindus claiming what is their right or what they believe is their place of astha. Is that against secularism? Or has this word been debased in Bharat?
Well, there's two things. One, secularism was to remove the control of the Catholic Church over certain countries in Europe. And then we have to remember India was not the only country to undergo independence from colonial or even from Islamic rule. The countries of Eastern Europe reclaimed their church sites, they reclaimed their culture. The Greeks, of course, also, that was a much longer battle, restore Greece. So this idea of restoring your civilization, your sacred sites, removing the indications of invaders ruling you, happened all over. Even Saudi Arabia removed the Turkish mosques because they had been under Turkish rule for some centuries. And they said that these were political monuments. So there was nothing unsecular about Hindu majorities wanting, in fact, when they were under minority rule, they were oppressed that way. When Hindus finally get a majority rule, they're told to protect the minorities and not take care of themselves. So you see, this is not an issue of secularism. It's an issue of a certain group of the society, the Nehruvian British educated wanting to stay in power, and that a Hindu majority could remove them from power. So secular has become just a political propaganda tool.
Panditji, Hindutva is fascist, Hindutva is casteist, and rise of Hinduism or Hindu consciousness in Bharat will again give way to another round of majoritarianism. How would you want to respond to such statements?
Well, first of all, fascists were Italian Catholics under Mussolini wanting to give more power to the Catholic tradition of Italy. You don't need to use these terms relative to Asia. Right and left are Western terms. And European nationalism, you're supposed to be a modern nation state, was also behind World War I, World War II, and now Europe has another war via Ukraine. So it was an attempt to demonize, Hindutva was an attempt to demonize any Hindu resistance. But all these groups have been using their own resistance and their own fighting, and also to tell Hindus that it's wrong for you to defend yourselves or assert your own identity, because that is offensive to certain minorities and will hurt their feelings. Democracy is meant to be the rule of the majority, and particularly the rule of a majority that has been suppressed. So you might say the Hindus did not get independence in 1947 from being the oppressed majority under foreign rule. They became the oppressed majority under a certain leftist Nehruvian rule.
Is Hindutva inclusive or discriminatory, or Hindu faith or the Hindu way of life, Panditji?
Well, let's go back to what religion is. The Western religions, Christianity and Islam, believe that they're exclusive. Ours is the only faith. God is with us. And if you don't join us, then you go to hell or some other bad place. And it's our duty to conquer and convert the world, which they tried to do for centuries, and which India was one of the main targets. And for conversion, India still is. So if Hindutva people are fascist, what about all the missionaries and the colonial forces and even the Marxists? They've been trying to convert the world by force to their particular views. Hindutva are Hindus who are speaking out at a political level and wanting their rightful rights and power. You can be certain where communists become a majority in India or elsewhere, they take power over everything, etc., and so on. And it challenges their rule because they wanted to make Hindus so passive that they would not respond and not fight back. And so when Hindus do that, that's a big problem for them.
There is a lot of argument around Varnashrama, Jati, or Guna and Karma, and how it is understood and how it's related with the caste system. And there has been an attempt to not just brand Hindutva as casteist, but also big movements like SB 403 in the US. Where do you stand on Varna and Jati, and it being associated with birth or by karma, that is actions?
Yes, let me put in a little broader perspective. When the British ruled India, they were the ruling caste, and Hindus were, the brown people who had to go to servant quarters and all the rest of it. After independence, the Nehruvian Lutyens elite was the ruling class, taking the privileges for themselves, writing the books, establishing the history, and all the rest of it. Varna is an ancient idea of the division of society based upon certain functions. It's kind of like the model of the human body. You have certain people who take the role of the educators or the head, the protectors or the arm, or they're supporting the feet, or they're doing these different roles, because society should be an organic structure, and you cannot perform all functions yourself. It's true the head is at the top of the body, but the feet shouldn't, the hands can't say, I want to walk on my hands, so the head is at the bottom. So Varna, as in all the societies to some degree, even in all the traditional societies, you had a priestly order, you had aristocracy, you had merchants, and all of that. And over time, it took certain rigidity in some areas. In other areas, it changed, or Varna changed. Jati is birth. Birth has a very important role in everything. Status of birth is always recognized. The British, of course, had that. So many countries, if you have a wealthy family, if you have an educated family, differences of birth are there. But there were also the supportive extended communities in a jati. Caste is a European term from the colonial era. I think there were 18 castes in Mexico between the pure Spanish at the top and the pure Native Americans at the bottom. But in the colonial world, all Hindus belong to the lower castes. And in the Nehruvian world, the Hindu religion is an inferior one, just as the Christian is. So there are social differences, rich and poor, different groups, different communities. And India has some of these social problems as well. Today in the West, we're seeing a greater division of rich and poor, and we're seeing changes in discrimination at various levels. So caste was also used to make the British look good. We're saving you from caste by taking over your country. So caste has to be addressed, but to make that into the only thing. Now, what's happened in America is very funny because the Hindus have been successful. And because they're dark-skinned people, some of the other groups are saying, who haven't been so successful as dark-skinned people, that the Hindus are white people in brown bodies. How that occurs is another matter, but it shows you the divisions and the conflicts involved. And what's happened to Hindus in the West is because they're so successful in terms of education, affluence, high tech, there's jealousy about them. It's also happened with the other Asian students. Asian students are restricted in the number of people going to school because they tend to do well. Now, as India, Bharat is rising as a country, this is also causing jealousy for the other countries in the world, and they need excuses to divide India or to have it be less strong or make it politically incorrect. Look around India. What other country is more democratic and more diverse than India? Is it China? Is it Pakistan? Is it Bangladesh? Is it Iran? See, it doesn't happen that way at all. So Indians also have to recognize there's a lot of name calling going on. The left always called people they don't like fascist. Now we're told that anybody you don't like is anti-democratic, and democracy can be used to divide countries. If that was true, the American Civil War was an anti-democratic war, and the South should have seceded because they voted and said we wanted to go. So India has to have, I would say, some inner strength. So what if these people criticize you? Look at the world today. America's terribly divided, almost to the level of conflict. Europe is having another inside Europe, or you could say almost civil war. They are also divided. India is coming up. India has the highest growing economy in the world today. So there is opposition to that, but that comes out of a national sense of unity, not just as at an economic or political level, but at a cultural level. And India's civilization is coming up. What the scientists are talking about in terms of consciousness and billion-of-year universe is something you had in Indian text centuries or even thousands of years ago. But when media and academia is going against you globally to some degree, then of course you have to challenge it, but you also have to not simply be taken in by that.
Who is Ram to you, Panditji? And who is Ram to Bharat?
A very good question. Now, Ram is very interesting in many ways. And of course, the thing we have to understand, Ramayana is the oldest book in the Sanskrit language. It's the Adi Kavi Valmiki and the Adi Kavya. Even Ashwagosha, who did the Buddha Charita, lauded Valmiki and the Ramayana while giving the life of Buddha. It is the oldest story in the world that's still being performed. It's the basics of India's music, dance, festivals, concept of Dharma. And Ram also appears as a great guru. We have also the, Yoga Vasishta Ramayana, all the secrets there. And then you have to remember in the Indias, when the foreign invaders came in, why did they take Ram Janmabhoomi down? Because it was a symbol of pride to the Hindus. Why did the Hindus fight back for it? It was national identity. Even the dynasties of Korea had married a princess from Ayodhya, and that was a great gain for them. And what is the capital of Thailand called is Ayutthaya and Ram. So it is a civilizational identity and story. Of course, Mahabharata is part of that at another level. And it was taken care of for years and decades. And you have to understand, invaders are wanting to establish their power and dominance. And you do that by taking over civilizational monuments. That is a long thing. So Ram, to me, is also the arising of Bharat altogether as in a new century for its civilization. And even Ram, we have a Hanuman temple and a Ram temple within an hour of where we live, built by the devotees of Neem Karoli Baba. So the chant of Ram is also moving globally. And the story is being everywhere. And what is Ayodhya will be? It's going to be a great tourist site. All the people of Asia are going there. It's not threatening anybody. Hindus haven't invaded any countries. Even Ram had to save his wife, but there was no history of that in the Indian tradition. Hindus are a threat to who? Hindus are the most peaceful country of all the immigrants, and they are increasing the economies of the countries in which they are going to. They have to defend themselves from China, Pakistan, and other countries, but who are they a threat to? They are a threat to those who feel threatened by a resurgent India at a civilizational level because it has different values, a different view of the universe, and it is also teaching people a way of life beyond politics in harmony with the universal Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, not just a political invention of a few decades ago, which seems to change every year as to what is politically correct or not, and standing for all the ancient civilizations, all the indigenous people, all the non-European civilization. Even today, with centuries of trying to convert Hindus to Christianity and Islam, even by force and intimidation, Hindus are the third largest religion in the world after Christianity and Islam without having to invade or conquer anyone. And Hindu ideas, karma, rebirth, yoga, meditation, self-realization, and so on, are being embraced globally by various communities.
Panditji, final two questions. You talked about Krishna. Ram and Krishna both are supposed to uphold dharma, but
Yes.
both of them have very different ways and approaches. Would you agree, disagree? How can Ram and Krishna be apostles of dharma when their methods were very different? Yes, it was in different yugas, but this is a question often asked.
Well, I think it's a misleading question. Dharma is not a fixed law. Dharma means doing what is best possible in any given circumstance, and often in life we do not have ideal circumstances. Sri Krishna followed the path of diplomacy as much as he could. So did the Pandavas. The only choice they were given for not going to war would be to just give up altogether and let the forces of adharma win. Dharma doesn't mean you don't fight. In fact, the Kshatriya Dharma means you must fight the forces of adharma because they will not leave unless they are defeated. If you just bow down to them, you are actually accepting a surrender. And Ram also did fight. Again, he tried not to, and his wife was taken. The assault was on him. He didn't go after anyone directly himself. So I don't really see a difference there in values. I see some slightly difference in strategy. And again, we don't live in a world where everything is ideal. Gandhian ahimsa did not work by itself. You had the movement of the revolutionaries, you had Subhash Chandra Bose, you had even Gandhi. He was very good as using a verbal kshatriya because he at least did the critical factors. There's always his famous quote, what he thought of Western civilization, and he said it would be a good idea. So obviously he wanted to continue a Bharatiya tradition in some ways. And ahimsa does not just simply mean nonviolence. It means doing what is necessary to reduce or prevent violence, which means doing what is necessary to reduce the forces of adharma. And self-defense is practiced by almost every community, and often even communities, countries attacking another country say, well, I'm defending myself. So I think the message of Rama and Krishna is clear and consistent, but also once peace is gained, they didn't invade another country, try to take on another community. They encouraged people to do sadhana, to practice dharma, to be peaceful, to worship the divine in so many different ways, and to honor their elders. There's no honor in the world today. There's no respect. It's a self-assertion. Ahankara seems to be the way to go. So these ancient cultures of respect have their beauty and their power, and I think more of that needs to come again today. No, Rama and Krishna reflect one another, and that also means that you can't have Krishna Janmabhoomi left aside if Ram Janmabhoomi is back, but there's even all the legal, all the historical support is of Krishna Janmabhoomi also. And think, India is such a big country. If the Mughals wanted to build a mosque, they had a lot of open ground they could use. They didn't have to go through the main Hindu temple sites to do it. If it was a matter of devotion to Allah, it didn't require that it's done in that one place. It can be done in so many places. So obviously there was other motives behind what they were doing. They certainly weren't raising secularism. They certainly weren't trying to say we honor all religions. They were saying we're asserting our political supremacy by humiliating a culture at its main cultural sites.
Very well, Panditji. But my final question: many believe that the consecration of Ram Lalla and on the 22nd signals or heralds perhaps a turning point for Bharat. Are we on the right path under the current leadership of Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
You are definitely on the right path. You had the decades of the Nehruvian path. They didn't stop communal riots. They didn't bring peace. They didn't gain even the respect of Pakistan to go, to stay back and not attack. They also did not raise the civilization of India. They were essentially following a Marxist ideology in what they did. And the socialist economics was a disaster. The industrialists left Calcutta because of them. They lost power because of them. Their Soviet model did not raise India's economy. And it also didn't increase India's trade. And it didn't increase India's political respect in the world. I have to, it's a funny thing to say, but you have more pictures of Modi hugging major political leaders in the world and them hugging him back than all the Gandhis, I think, put together. And even those who may not be happy with India rising are forced to respect India. India is now at the forefront of ecology, also technology, spirituality, economics. Look at the infrastructure. How come the Nehru dynasty in so many decades couldn't build good roads in the country? Look at all the roads that have come up under not only Modi, but Nitin Gadkari, and the renovation of the country in so many ways. Ayurveda's come up because it's getting support. International Yoga Day has come up because of Modi. One of the Congress people were saying the other day that they would have visited Ram Janmabhoomi if politicians weren't there. Well, you know, you guys were in power for decades and you didn't bother to bring it back either with politicians or with sadhus or with anybody else. You cried when Babri Masjid came down. You said it was India was denying its civilization to remove what invaders had done. By that account, Shivaji Maharaj would have been a great denier of Indian civilization, and Aurangzeb would have been an upholder of it. So let's look at it in the broader Dharmic and Bharatiya perspective. Bharat is rising. India's civilization is one of the greatest in the world. It has been lauded that way. This is also very interesting. The Europeans got the Upanishads from Prince Dara, who was Aurangzeb's brother, who Aurangzeb killed, who should have been the head of the Mughal Empire. And then Voltaire loved it. The Europeans loved it. So when the British took over India, and of course Columbus went to America looking for India, in order to justify ruling India, they had to destroy the image of greatness that India had, ruin the economy, put the Kohinoor gem in there, which came from the Kakatiya Hindus, not even from elsewhere, and deny the history of India. India is a history of invaders. If that's true, how come how come Vedas in India are chanted today as they were 5,000 years ago? The ancient Egyptian pyramids are forgotten. The Celtic traditions are gone. So many of these things. So they tried to destroy India as a culture, a civilization, an economy. They, of course, fought opium wars to get the Chinese addicted to opium. So India is rising today. And the Nehrus didn't want India to rise, just like some of the socialist leaders. The money goes to their family. Socialist leaders are the biggest caste, and like Lalo and Bahar and all of that, everything went to their families. Family dynasties is also a casteism. And again, dynasty is not democracy. And so it's very important that as Bharat rises, the Modi's brought more, what is this, electricity, water, gas to the poor, infrastructure, education accounts for the women. If all these groups had been supporting democracy and equality and raising the poor, they would have done it when they were in power. They just gave money to the poor at election time to buy their votes so they could stay in power longer. And then India remembers, don't worry about what the West is saying about India so much. They've always been critical. The colonialists are going to be critical to rule over you. And if India is rising, that's going to bother them a bit. But yet there are many who also support India, that culture, that civilization. And you're supposed to have national pride. Barack Obama said American exceptionalism. Then he went ahead and he eliminated quite a few enemies with his drone attacks. I'm not going to say I'm criticizing him. But the point is, India also has an exceptionalism and a national pride and its dharmic traditions, yoga, meditation, whether it's Hindu, Buddhist, Jain, Puranic, Tantric. This is a great gift to the world. Science of consciousness survived and developed in India. Now scientists are going to start looking for it. Psychologists think consciousness is still limited to the brain and you control it by chemistry. I say that belongs to the Middle Ages. Consciousness is you, is the universe. You are one with all. That is your true self. You can raise your awareness to a universal, eternal level. That is the Indian vision, not just simply local politics and conquering the world. Conquer yourself and you can conquer the entire universe. So we should be happy India is rising and not make it politically incorrect. The fact is, it's civilizationally a great gift for all. And if we can bring that dharmic civilizational values and practices into our democracies, they might do a lot better, because our democracies claim to be based upon equality, but they have a lot of inequality, fighting, wars, political power. And then Do we have democracy at a level of diplomacy? No, we have certain countries who set the standards for the rest of the so-called democratic world to follow. There should be equality on that level. And economic, I should say, in terms of the diplomacy, India has a great strategy. The global south, a multipolar world. Why is it that under the so-called European democracy, we've still had a unipolar world? So let India rise, and I think it will benefit many countries. Modi has done a great work in bringing that about, but he has inspired a country and a youth, and they will take it forward. And India is going forward today. It is the only ancient civilization that has survived colonialists, missionaries, and all the rest of it. And it is one that still has a vision going to the future, because our future is universal. And it's not just democracy, it's honoring all of life as sacred. And as Upanishads say, seeing oneself in all beings. That's what the Hindus teach, not caste. Purusha Vedam Sarvam. The Purusha is everything. You are the universe. That Purusha, that self is you. Hari Om.